Ever wondered what happens when WWE superstars trade the ring ropes for the cage walls? Some rose to glory. Others got wrecked. This isn't just another list. It's the ultimate scorecard of who actually delivered when it mattered. From Brock Lesnar's terrifying UFC run to Dave Bautista's short-lived debut, we're sorting out the true fighters from the hype. By the end, you'll know exactly who earned their place as a true fighter and who proved that not every ring legend belongs in a cage. So if you've ever argued about which WWE wrestler could actually hold their own in MMA, get ready. This list is going to settle it once and for all. When it comes to WWE stars crossing over into MMA, there's one man who stands above everyone else, Brock Lesnar. Brock didn't just make the jump, he tore the cage door off its hinges. After dominating WWE for 2 years, Lesnar left in 2004 with unfinished business. He tried football first, but when that didn't pan out, he set his sights on something far tougher: mixed martial arts. Most people laughed at the idea. A scripted wrestler in real combat? No way. But the moment Brock stepped into his first MMA fight, those laughs turned into silence. He finished his debut opponent in just over a minute. Pure power, no hesitation. The UFC noticed immediately and signed him to a one-fight deal. And even though Brock lost his UFC debut, the performance was so strong that the company knew they had something special. A few months later, Lesnar came back swinging, literally. He won his next fight, earning himself a shot at the UFC Heavyweight Championship against the legendary Randy Couture. Nobody thought a former WWE champion could handle a fighter like Couture, but Brock shocked the world. With his combination of size, speed, and wrestling dominance, he smashed through Randy, becoming the first and only man ever to hold both the WWE Championship and the UFC Heavyweight title. For a while, Brock looked unstoppable. He defended the belt twice, raking in massive pay-per-view numbers and bringing in a new wave of fans who'd never watched UFC before. But just as he hit his peak, his health turned on him. Brock was diagnosed with diverticulitis, a serious intestinal disease that nearly ended his career. Even after surgery, he stepped back into the cage to fight monsters like Cain Velasquez and Alistair Overeem. He lost those fights, but the fact that he competed at that level while recovering from a life-threatening illness says it all. Despite the losses, Lesnar's impact went beyond wins and knockouts. He changed the business. He proved that a WWE superstar could walk into the toughest sport on earth and actually dominate. He helped UFC hit record-breaking pay-per-view numbers, introduced millions of new fans to MMA, and forced critics to admit that pro wrestlers could be real fighters too. Now, right behind Brock, just a step below, stands Bobby Lashley, another powerhouse who made his mark in both worlds. Lashley didn't have the same fame or stage as Lesnar, but his record speaks for itself. 17 fights, 15 wins, only 2 losses. That's not entertainment, that's dominance. Still, when you talk about the best, the crown belongs to Brock Lesnar, not just because of the titles or the money, but because of what he represented. Every time Brock entered the cage, he carried the pride of WWE, the grit of a real wrestler, and the heart of a fighter who refused to quit. He wasn't just the best crossover athlete. He was living proof that power, discipline, and mindset can turn a so-called performer into a real-world champion. Let's move down the list and talk about who flopped the hardest once they left the ring. At number 9, we've got CM Punk, and his story is a mix of guts, heart, and pure miscalculation. When Punk left WWE in 2014, he shocked the world by signing with the UFC. Fans were curious, fighters were furious, and the media was all over it. The man had zero fighting experience, but he trained for over a year, pouring everything into it. The problem? Training doesn't always prepare you for real punches. When CM Punk finally made his debut in 2016, the world was watching, and it was brutal. Within seconds, his opponent Mickey Gall took him down, controlled him easily, and forced a tap-out in just over 2 minutes. The dream turned into a nightmare on live pay-per-view. To his credit, Punk didn't quit. He came back for a second fight 2 years later. He looked better, sharper, more patient, but still outclassed. He made it to a decision this time, but he lost again. Later, that fight was ruled a no contest, but everyone knew the truth. Punk's MMA run had crashed hard, and it wasn't just the losses. What made Punk's fall so rough was the stage he chose. He didn't test the waters in smaller promotions. He jumped straight into the UFC, the toughest league in the world, against fighters half his age with 10 times the experience. Respect for the courage? Definitely. But results-wise, it was one of the biggest flops in crossover history. Still, Punk wasn't alone. Right behind him on the list, and maybe even below him, is Kid Cash. Now, if Punk's fights were quick, Cash's was faster. At 47 years old, he decided to try MMA. 47. His opponent? A 22-year-old beast named Lindsey Jones. The fight lasted 39 seconds, a few punches, a stumble, and it was over. The most ironic part? Kid Cash had publicly mocked CM Punk for losing so quickly, only to get knocked out even faster. And then there's Dr. Death, Steve Williams, a man whose nickname promised toughness, but whose MMA debut said otherwise. Williams stepped into the cage at 43, faced a kickboxer half his age, and the fight ended in 7 seconds. One flying knee, a few punches, lights out. Just like that, one of wrestling's most feared names was done. See, that's the cruel truth of MMA. Your reputation doesn't follow you in there. The cage doesn't care about charisma, championships, or catchphrases. It only respects skill, stamina, and timing. For every Lesnar or Lashley who thrived, there were stars like Punk, Cash, and Williams who found out the hard way that reality hits harder than any storyline. So we've seen the best rise to the top, and the worst crash and burn. That leaves one big question. What really separates the greats from the disappointments? It all comes down to 3 things: background, mindset, and preparation. Let's start with background. The truth is, the wrestlers who actually made it in MMA weren't just entertainers. They were already real athletes. Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley were both NCAA Division I wrestling champions before they ever stepped into a WWE ring. Ken Shamrock trained in submission grappling years before MMA was even a term people used. Jake Hager, another collegiate All-American wrestler. These guys didn't walk into the cage blind. They had a foundation built on discipline, combat awareness, and the ability to control another human being. That's something no amount of scripted matches can teach you. Now compare that to someone like CM Punk or Batista. Both had the heart, both trained hard, but they started too late. Punk began at 37, an age where most fighters are retiring. Batista was in his 40s when he debuted, and neither came from a combat sport background. They were learning how to swim while already in the deep end. Then comes the mindset. The successful ones treated MMA like a whole new career, not a side project. Lashley trained quietly, stayed humble, and built his record one fight at a time. Lesnar locked himself away from cameras and focused purely on becoming a champion. They respected the sport. The ones who failed often underestimated what it would take, thinking star power would make up for skill. It never does. Once the cage door closes, there's nowhere to hide. And finally, Preparation. Lesnar surrounded himself with elite coaches. Lashley trained year-round while juggling pro wrestling. Even Jake Hager, who fought in Bellator, never skipped the grind. That's why they won. Meanwhile, guys like Dr. Death and Kid Cash stepped in underprepared, overconfident, and past their prime. That's not bravery. That's a bad strategy. But maybe the biggest difference of all is this: motivation. The greats wanted to prove something. Lashley wanted to be taken seriously. Lesnar wanted to silence doubters. Shamrock wanted to show that wrestlers could hang with any fighter alive. The others? They wanted spotlight, and MMA doesn't reward that. So what makes one succeed and another fail? It's not fame. It's not power. It's respect for the craft, for the grind, and for the fight itself. When the lights fade and the cage door locks, every fighter faces the same truth: you can't fake heart. And that's why, years later, we still talk about Lesnar, Lashley, and Shamrock as real warriors, and the rest as reminders that hype fades fast when reality hits back. When Brock Lesnar crushed opponents and became a UFC champion, he didn't just win fights, he broke barriers. Bobby Lashley followed close behind, stacking wins and earning respect the hard way. Ken Shamrock built the bridge between wrestling and MMA before anyone else even thought it was possible. These men didn't rely on storylines or pyrotechnics. They relied on pure heart, strength, and skill. But for every success story, there was a cautionary tale. CM Punk, Kid Cash, Dr. Death Steve Williams, they learned the hard truth that toughness in the ring doesn't always mean toughness in the cage. The crowd, the cameras, the lights, none of that matters when it's just you, your opponent, and the fight. That's what makes this list so powerful. It's not just about wins and losses. It's about transformation. It's about watching larger-than-life characters step into a place where nothing is scripted and proving who they really are. From Lesnar's heavyweight dominance to Punk's painful lessons, these stories remind us what happens when confidence meets reality. And only the strongest walk away, standing tall. So if you're watching this and thinking, who else could survive that transition? Hit that like button, drop a comment with your pick, and subscribe, because we're just getting started. More rankings, more rivalries, more reality check moments are coming your way. This is where the lights fade, the hype dies, and the truth hits hardest. Because at the end of the day, in wrestling or in fighting, respect isn't given, it's earned.